Welcome in to episode 3 of the Empire Cup Blood Bowl podcast review. We're starting to get to the point where we're going to need to actually iron a name down at this point.
What if we called it the Unnamed Blood Bowl podcast?
Yeah, maybe.
Naming it the Unnamed Blood Bowl podcast.
That could work. I think, SEO will love us for that.
We have to spell it with wacky spellings like the band Churches, just to try to separate some SEO.
Yeah, the VIN name.
the V-named Blood Bowl podcast by Empire Games. I'm Nathan, jumping in this week as a guest. Fred is off doing some sideline reporting this week. We will hear back from him again for sure. But yeah, I'm pitching in to help out with Yannie this week.
Yeah, absolutely. We're gonna be jumping in. We've got a lot of things to talk about this week. A lot of action that happened, and a whole new week to look forward to.
Yeah, this last week, the first week, the way it played out, it felt like a script that you had seen before. But I don't know if you remember, like a decade ago, when Tom Brady got hurt in like the first or second week of the league of the NFL, and you were like, "Oh no, what? We haven't seen the script before, right?" That type of vibe happened the second week for sure.
Yeah, it's been a week. Obviously, we thought that week 1 was pretty bloody. As we get into some of the recaps of week 2, though, we'll see that it was bloodier than we could have imagined for certain teams, especially.
Yeah.
But we've got a whole bunch of games to go over. Dead Man's Hand, my division. We've got a lot of...
Dead Man's Hand.
Yeah, Dead Man's Hand division. We've got a very interesting way it's playing out. Not any clear front runners. Nobody is at their maximum point total of 6 points. No one's got 2 wins. We've got wins and draws, lots of draws. I think all the draws in the league have happened so far.
Yeah, it's like 7 or something so far. Blood Bowl is a game where draws are pretty common. Like, I want to say half the games or whatever can often end up being a draw, or maybe 40% of games end up being in a draw. Especially if you look at like tournament Blood Bowl. Like when I played at Chaos Cup, my record was 3 wins and 3 draws, right? A lot of times, if your opponent starts deciding at some point in the game to play for a draw, it can be very difficult to disrupt that game plan. And in a league, any points is better than no points a lot of times, especially when you get down the stretch and you're looking for like playoffs stuff. So a lot of people will just settle for a draw. And that seems to be kind of the case in the Dead Man's Hand division for sure.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting to see as it plays out later in the season when we're getting towards the point of playoffs and seeing how that's all going to play out. I know there was a little bit of a sweat at the bottom of one of the divisions last season, the way it played out, where like if some draws had turned into wins somewhere along the line, people would have been able to rest a little bit easier. But one interesting game that I would want to point out, the Jolly Rotters and GG's of Electric City, the Shambling Undead human matchup. That one was a draw on a last turn interception by a zombie.
Yeah, that's some late game heroics. That's the type of event that Blood Bowl legends are made of, right? This zombie maybe gets a casualty later in the season, then he gets a random skill. It's really hard to level up zombies, and so this intercepting zombie now ends up being like a key piece on the Shambling Undead team just because he was gifted 2-star player points in a game. And the thing is the GGs were up 2-0, and that's usually like a very difficult deficit to overcome in a Blood Bowl game. It's rare for a player to be able to score 2 touchdowns fast enough, and so the fact that it was a draw is incredible. So
yeah, one interesting aspect to that game too is you see the kind of knock-on effects of a season in a league with how players get injured. Humans were missing their ogre from the first game, a casualty that I was able to secure pretty early on. And there's a chance if that ogre had been in the field, could have been, dueled with some mummies, had an extra strong piece on the board. Instead, you're at a strength disadvantage with that human team, and that could have been a contributing factor to being able to make up that deficit.
Yeah, both teams were like really willing to foul in that game. Like if you look at the game log, there were a lot of fouls thrown. It looked like Chris had a couple people kicked out. And when you are at a strength deficit, one of the fouling is like a good way to try to remove some of those tough pieces. But you can often end up, if things don't break your way, you can end up behind. And I think that's what happened here. I'm willing to bet Chris didn't have many people on the pitch towards the end of the game. Between mummies and having people kicked out with fouling, you can just be gassed. And at that point, I'm sure Chris was just trying to throw the ball away, right? If he's just trying to air it out just to get it away from his end zone, and a zombie slaps it out of the sky, that's Blood Bowl right there. That's cinema.
Yeah. Other notable records from this week. I had a draw against Fred with the Retainers. It's a pretty interesting game. Statistically, I think on the downside, lots of knockdowns, lots of armor breaks, 1 casualty, 6 KOs. 4 of those KOs happened on the first drive. And I scored on turn 8. On Fred's turn 8, 2 of those players came back, and then on turn 9, the other 2 came back.
Oof,
so,
yeah.
A half worth of damage to the teams kind of invalidated. He was able to get a lot of 1-die heroics to get into spots, lots of dodges into 1-dice blocks, and was able to knock the ball out a couple times. And I had a shot to score. Would have been a lot of rolling and failed halfway through. But it would have been a blitz into a handoff into like a dodge.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So lots of dice.
The avenue was there.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those like you do the math on it, it's a 2 or a 1% once you get through all the rolls, but the avenue is there, you gotta take it. You just gotta take it, right?
Oh, for sure. It was a definitely an interesting game. Looking back on it, I think there were some spots where I might have gotten a little bit too aggressive on the second half drive with the ball carrier to get him out of danger, putting him into slightly more precarious spots. But overall, I felt pretty confident with the game. It was a good game. So.
Yeah, it can be hard to stop Skaven from scoring, especially with dwarves. Like your positioning has to be so on point, just because gutter runners can do laps around your whole team. So yeah, I can see how that game could, like, especially early in a season, where there's not enough skills on the dwarf team to really make the Skaven players pay. Right? You don't have the mighty blow that a lot of late game dwarf teams would have. We can jump on down to the Snake Eyes division. There were a lot of 1-0 wins in the Snake Eyes division. Right now, the Snake Eyes division is kind of stratified. Looks kind of like tournament results. You got several 2-0s. You got a lot of 1-1s. You got lots of 0-2s. So it seems like it's kind of settling into positions, but it's really early in the season. I don't want to make any kind of grand claims about where people are going to end up in a division. You got a lot of people, a lot of like threats that are hanging out in the 1-1. The Gnarly Oaks, the Rue, a lot of those teams, TBD, a lot of those teams can turn it around down the stretch and still be really fearsome. I played this week versus Chase and his South California Trojans. And honestly, it was probably I have a suspicion that this was the best looking match as far as models go. Chase's teams looked really, really good. He's got the that USC inspired paint job on his team, and he's customized the Elven Union team with like Harlequin mohawks and the Harlequin masks. It looks really good. He's put a lot of work into it, and I'm paying his team all this lip service because I won the game 3-1, and that game kind of boiled down to two really key roles in the middle of the game. The first half played out kind of a typical Blood Bowl half where he got the ball first as elves and scored, and then I managed to just kind of grind out the rest of the half, score late in the half. We were tied. He's kicking the ball back to me. My intention to here, once again, just grind out the whole half. But he gets really, really aggressive, and he like bases my whole team. And so I find myself in this really awkward kind of position where I have to try to extricate the ball from my backfield. My ball carrier is like based with two elves, and I was using a marauder to carry the ball, so he's got frenzy. It's not really safe for him to like throw a blitz, so I estimate that my best option there is to just dodge away. But I have to clear a lane for him, and to do that I have to throw a block with like the blood spawn. It's like the second block that I throw in the turn, and I roll double skulls, which you've seen this before. You know how the script plays out. The big guy rolls double skulls, but in this instance the script was reversed, and I managed to make the loner check, and the blood spawn threw his block the way he needed to. That opened up a hole for my ball carrier to just dodge. And after playing Amazon's a 3-up dodge, as long as I have a team reroll for it, I'll take those all day. I make that dodge roll. My guy breaks away. And so I end up taking like 2 of his players off the pitch on that turn, all because the blood spawn didn't bungle it. And then the next turn, Chase makes like this 3-up, 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 go for it, dodge to 1-die my ball carrier with his blitzer, and pops the ball loose, and the ball scatters into the crowd. And the crowd is going to throw it back onto my side of the field, but only rolls a 3. So it just kind of falls right back into the scrum that we were in. And so when he goes to try to recover it, he's having to try to pick it up in the 2 tackle zones, and he burned a bunch of his rerolls to make the dodging to go hit the guy. He fails to pick it up, and from there I'm able to like re-secure the ball and kind of make my way down the field, run the clock out, and then he's got like a last-ditch effort to try to score. So, and he's having to throw the ball with like a catcher who throws it inaccurately, scatters into the crowd, stumbles off to some other place, and I can go pick up like a garbage time touchdown. So that's the way that game played out. It wasn't really like, I don't think he made like terribly. He was kind of down after the game, but I don't think he made like terrible tactical errors. I just had like 2 really important things go my way in that game, and this game could have been 3-1 elves otherwise. So
yeah, so you touched on it a little bit with obviously talking about frenzy, not wanting to blitz. Your whole team has frenzy.
Just about, yeah.
So what is your experience so far with that? Obviously, this is a newer team that you're playing. Every season that I've played in the league, at least you played a different team.
Yeah.
Choosing Khorne this time, what led to that decision?
Yeah, one, I wanna mix it up, and originally I played through like a bunch of the human teams, right? I started with Nobility, played Norse, played Amazons, and then I played 1 season with Wood Elves, and then I played Vampires and played some Necro. I like playing all the teams because I think in card games, like if you are playing with like a meta or something like that, it's just as important to play with the best deck in the format, just so that you know how it operates. I feel the same way about Blood Bowl teams. Now everybody's got a different like play style, and I think all the different teams are designed for different play styles, right? Khorne, I wanted to try out one of the Chaos teams. Khorne's a team that's been represented in the league fairly often. This was one where there might have been like 1 or 2 other players who were playing it, but I decided to go ahead and jump in with Khorne. After playing last season where I was playing Necro and there were like 4 total Necro players or whatever, it was nice playing the only team of its type in a league this time around. But I felt like the tactical nature of the team, the way Frenzy works, and so far playing the team, I felt like I've gotten to just kind of pick positioning on the table. Nobility is obviously like a mirror of the team, where Nobility is like a team that doesn't want to move, and Khorne is a team that wants to move people around. Nobility, I loved playing defense with Nobility because people will just like run their cage into your bodyguards, and then 3 turns later they would be in the exact same spot they were. Khorne, on the other hand, is like when I'm on offense, I can pick a side of the field, and then the opponents just have to respect the sideline, right? Otherwise, their whole team gets dumped into it, and that's just been really fun. So you don't start incredibly bashy. Obviously, the Bloodspawn is a menace, starting Claw's Mighty Blow, but the whole rest of the team doesn't have like the combat skills outside of Frenzy. You don't have block. You don't have anybody starting Mighty Blow like a mummy, and you don't have any tackle. Frenzy can like sometimes be used as a substitute for tackle just because you get an extra hit on someone. And your Khorngors have got Juggernaut and Horns, so they're like really good at blitzing. But like the whole team wants to blitz. So you have to make some tactical decisions there as well. So it's been a lot of fun. I would recommend Khorne for anybody. I consider it one of the noble teams in the league. Okay, there are honorable teams, and Khorne is definitely on that list because they just want to get in there and fight. They're not having to use any sort of skullduggery, any sort of trickery, nothing that like the stunty teams like to bring to the game. So yeah, there you go.
Very, very apt comparison, I'd say. Seems like you have some resentment there for Stunty.
No, that I can't imagine why you would think that.
No, Stunty teams have done nothing wrong ever in the history of this league. You mentioned staying away from sidelines. There's one very specific player that really would have liked to have stayed away from the sidelines.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about. But first, we have a word from our sponsor. Hi, I'm Sarah McLaughlin. Will you be an angel for a helpless werewolf? Every day, innocent were creatures are abused, beaten, and neglected, and they're crying out for help. Please, call the number on your screen with a monthly gift right now. For just $18 a month, only 60 cents a day, you'll help rescue Blood Bowl playing animals from their abusers and provide medical care, food, shelter, and love. Call or join online in the next 30 minutes, and you'll receive this welcome kit with a photo of a werewolf in a shelter right now. One who's been given a second chance. Thanks to you.
Very heart-wrenching advertising read. I can picture it in my head. The poor werewolf.
Yeah. There's a song playing in the background. But yes, this is we're crash segueing into the in memoriam section. The werewolf. This is Jim's Elias Gorfing werewolf has died, which is just incredible. That
was one of the fastest reactions I've seen in the Bloodboard Discord channel. Was that immediately being posted? And
yeah, I don't think there's been a player since Juan's 5-strength Vampire Blitzer that a league has actively rooted against as fast. And honestly, the werewolf, did he deserve it at this point? I don't know. But it certainly was like, what if 25 people wished that one model of Blood Bowl died in the next game they played? There's some evidence here, I think, to prove that theory, just because it was like immediate. And then Werewolf had scored another touchdown in that game. So you have 7 touchdowns just wiped from the league. All that SPP gone.
I think even at this point, if we go back and look through SPP totals for some of the teams, that werewolf had more SPP than a good number of teams in the league with 25. Had taken one skill, had a potential. I think if it had survived that game, it would have had a chance for a stat up.
Right.
Very close to it.
Yeah, we there was like a little bit of discussion, obviously off mic, about Jim's strategy here. Now, I believe it died to a crowd surf. I think that's what the report said. The werewolf got pushed into the crowd. The crowd took some souvenirs, and the werewolf failed to regenerate. So I believe the rationale of not putting dodge on the werewolf was that you can fill the bar, roll for the random stat, and if you hit a crazy stat, you hit strength or you hit agility, you keep it. And then, but if you whiff, you can just give it Mighty Blow, because Mighty Blow is really good on werewolves with claws, obviously. So I think that was the rationale there. Love to hear Jim's thought process on it. Jim is honestly, I mean, he's one of the players that I respect the most in the league. I think if you give Jim enough time, he will figure out what the optimal play is, and he's going to make it. So I will say that I'm not sad that this werewolf is gone. I do empathize with dead werewolves. I had a werewolf last season get a strength down and failed to regenerate, so we have to send him to the pasture.
This in memoriam segment is mostly centered on Snake Eyes. 5 of the 6 deaths this week were in that division. The one outlier, Alga I, the Norse lineman for Austin's Might of Asgard, who did have a skill, a strip ball, slain by the halflings, meeting some halfling justice.
Yeah, it looked like it got impaled on a tree. Yeah, you've got TBD took some losses. These are some tough losses. You had Squadgonix, the White, and Chak, the Ghoul. Both of those died. Now, the White is a kind of a tough loss. It looks like he was replaced immediately. Looks like he just went down as like a normal casualty. The Ghoul, on the other hand, appears to have died in the classic Ghoul fashion. It was either a failed dodge or a failed go for it. It looked like in tour play, the Ghoul died on TBD's turn, which is usually, indicative of a failed dodge or a failed go for it.
Not a normal stat line you can see looking at the box score for that game. 1 casualty for the Electric City Maulers, 2 deaths on the opposing side.
Yeah.
Something, you can tell something went terribly wrong.
Yeah, that was another one of those 1-0 games, and it looked like the Undead team had put a hurt on the Maulers, but the Maulers had just enough to stay above water there.
Yeah. Losing the Ghoul, definitely rough to the point where, looking at that point of the season, you're probably looking to add another Ghoul instead. Now you're stuck with 1 Ghoul again, having to rebuild your roster at a point where you're trying to supplement it.
Yeah.
Especially so early in the season. There's a chance you can rebuild and hopefully recover, but still tough losses to take early on.
Yeah, it's one of those where you can be comforted by the fact that other people are losing people too, right? It's different in a league where if you've had like 3 players die and nobody else has had players die, but as we've seen so far, there's been some heavy hitters that have gone down. That makes it a little bit easier to swallow, basically, in this case, where you aren't falling that far behind.
Yes. Also probably comforting that between those 2 players, you only had 3 SPP lost.
Yeah, not 20 something.
Other players that we have to send off to the other side this week: Duncan Pines, lineman for the Gnarly Oaks, and Trip, a Dark Elf lineman for the Zero Luck Chucks. His luck has run out.
Yeah, he's appropriately named. It looks like both of those players died to stunty players. So some stunty justice has been administered in this case. A skink and a goblin both got casualties and resulted in those deaths there. So
2nd week in a row for a skink casualty. I would love to see that trend continue. The best stat line of the season. Going on from there, that's all we've got for week 2. looking forward to week 3. We've got one game already in the books. Denver has division. It's another tie, surprise, surprise, between Rotten Peaches and Of Salesmen.
Yeah.
Amazon's at Black Orcs.
That would have been a good game of the week had it not already happened. That's the Battle of the Johns there, and I say John with the parentheses around the H because they much like the Sean Bowl, these Johns are fighting over how to spell the name John correctly. But 1-1 there. That's not too surprising to me, I think. Black Orcs, they're not like a great team, but I can see them giving Amazon's positional nightmares, right? Apparently, the Rotten Peaches here, the Amazons, took a beating in the game, and they had to play defense with like 7 people. But they still managed to keep the game a draw.
Yeah. And new up-and-coming foul leader, John Jurgen, coming in.
Yeah.
Doing lots of fouls to those goblins, making them live up to their bruiser name.
We would have to go back and look at previous seasons. I suspect if you're looking at lifetime foul totals, I think John Jurgen might be like the lowest ranked person. If you look at all of Blood Bowl played, and especially if you like divide that between number of games played, I'm willing to bet that John Jurgen would have been at the bottom of that list. So it's really funny to see him embrace the villainous role with this team because he is up there in contention now for most fouls for the season.
Yeah. It's like an interesting dynamic with that Black Orc team is having your heavy strength pieces that can really bash, and it's like, well, if I don't casualty you off the pitch with my orcs, I'm gonna just come and foul you off the pitch.
Yeah, and the grab helps with that, right? So grab is in that echelon of skills that is always would be kind of nice to have, but in a league you really need the key skills to keep your team going that make it more reliable. The fact that the Black Orcs start with grab means that you can set up some really advantageous fouls without having to sacrifice too much board position. One of the downsides of fouling that is, I think, undervalued is how it often puts you out of position, right? Having to group 4 or 5 or more models in an 8 square area on the pitch means you are having to give up a lot of real estate. Grab lets you do some of this without having to sacrifice too much positioning.
Other games this week, we've got the GG's Electric City playing Might of Asgard. Interesting looking at the preview for this game that Austin, missing an Elf Runner, missing a Yeti, still giving Chris inducement money currently.
Yeah. So humans they're kind of a sneaky team, I think, as far as inducement goes. Chris doesn't have like catchers. He does have a treasury. He can go buy stuff. But it looks like Chris has been making do with like mostly human linemen, which are a totally respectable Blood Bowl piece, right? And Austin's going to have a skill advantage, just the sheer amount of block. Austin also has both his Valkyries, which he's going to really wish that he had, especially with an Ogre on the pitch, right? The Valkyrie actually has a chance of knocking down an Ogre thanks to Dauntless. And Strip Ball is really good. It's just a good skill to have in the pocket. I don't know how to predict this game. A lot of it's just going to come down to early casualties. I think that segue into late game advantage.
Yeah. Halfling Justice, Imperial City Retainers. We saw last week Halfling Justice against Norse getting back to their full inducement package. This week's going to be another similar story.
Right. Yeah. And Fred, I think he's rightfully terrified of this matchup. not just because he's playing against his boss, but Fred, I think, is worried that his rats are going to get beat to pieces by trees and stuff like that. I think he can provide enough space, and honestly, I think you could just try to go toe for toe, like just trade blow for blow, touchdown wise, and it would be not easy for the halflings to stop gutter runners from scoring, right? And so, obviously at this point, Wayne knows how to get the most from his halfling team as long as his dice are cooperating. So I would say Wayne's most likely to win that game. But if Fred scraped out another draw there, I wouldn't actually be that shocked.
So currently the preview showing 405,000 in inducements for the halflings. What do you think that's going to be?
So the typical Wayne playbook is Griff plus Chef, which is 380, and that's really the comfort zone there. That's like, I would consider that the floor. Anytime, this is what in week 1, that's kind of like possibly why Wayne lost that game. He didn't have enough money to do that. Now, strategically, I don't necessarily know that it was correct to sabotage your own team playing against him, but whatever. I'll allow it, I guess. But in this case, 380 is like the floor. That's where he really wants the Chef plus Griff. The Chef helps the reroll situation for your opponent quite a bit for you as the halfling player, right? Like being able to steal rerolls is really nice. And then the team really struggles to score when it doesn't have Griff. So,
yeah, I guess from having just played Fred, I will say that Fred is definitely a player that's not afraid to take risks. So reducing those rerolls could be huge, having extra value, especially for someone who is more willing to take one die blocks or take a lot of dodges in a row with a character that might not have dodge. That's going to be something that plays up. And also having the rerolls, I think one thing is this season, this league, there are a lot of big guys that do not have skills yet.
Yeah, it's kind of, that's one of the underlying things of the league right now is there's an arms race for the big guys, right? If you can get your big guy to be the one with block first and you're playing against someone who doesn't have it, I think a lot of people want to match strengths in a game. They see a 5-strength player and they think, I need to send my 5-strength player into it. And a lot of big guy matchups, the big guy who alpha strikes, if they don't take the other big guy off the pitch, they often end up in a bad position, right? Fred doesn't have like a rat ogre, but like it would be absolutely a mistake to send the rat ogre against a tree in this matchup. Losing rerolls the way I like to play, if I've got rerolls, that's when I'm taking risks, right? Especially if they can pay off. And that's where I'll make dodges with 3 agility characters that don't have dodge. That's where I'll go to pick up the ball or I'll try a handoff. If I've got the reroll in my pocket, I'll try to hand that off, to get some sort of nice field advantage. Once I lose all my rerolls, that's what I call the cool zone, where lots of cool stuff starts happening in the game. That is where that's where I start clamping it down and start playing more conservative, just to try to keep things from flying off the rails.
Yeah. Definitely a big game to watch. I like your prediction. I could see that definitely just turning into a shootout.
Yeah.
Griff versus gutter runners.
Yeah. And honestly, that's to Fred's advantage. Even if he lost the game, but he got like 3 touchdowns on gutter runners, who cares? That's SPP for the rest of the league. Yeah. So.
Absolutely. Still definitely in that building stage.
Yeah.
Next game, this division is my game. Dwarves playing against insert clever name here, the Wood Elf team. This is going to be interesting. In the last week, I picked up enough SPP to put a skill on a lineman. I was kind of holding that in my pocket to wait to see what the week was going to look like. There's a lot of people that I would probably want guard against in this division. But now I'm playing this, I'm going to take Mighty Blow and try to see if I can get some more casualties.
Yeah. This is one of those it's not immediately obvious that, like, I think you look at this matchup and you say, oh, these dwarves are going to feast on the Wood Elves. And I think that's like a real easy assumption to make incorrectly here. The thing that frustrates dwarf teams are really fast teams, and that's what Wood Elves have. And if Mike plays careful, he gives you just a blitz every turn. He can minimize damage to his team, and you can possibly get out of position thanks to how much speed he has. Now, he's got to be careful with his War Dancer. Dwarves are not really a team that you want to try the cage dive with a War Dancer with. That gets you in trouble. That gets you a dead War Dancer, most likely. But if the ball gets kicked like into the back corner on your drive and you have to like have a runner leg it out there, you can be way out of position. He can have 5 elves between the rest of your team and that runner, right? And that's like a good way to lose that game. Blitz is another thing that's like terrible for a dwarf team. If the elf team rolls a blitz, you're just way out of position at that point, and you're playing behind the whole drive.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing I've been burned on before. Not so much with the dwarf team, especially when I was playing nobility, was getting burned by blitzes. So gotten a little bit better on defense for that. I think this is also a game that we were talking about it earlier this week, and for the Wood Elf side, I think it's beneficial to have this earlier.
Yes.
Because you don't have a lot of team value invested into things like dodge. Skills are just completely invalidated.
Correct.
Against a dwarf line with lots of tackle.
Yeah. You have paid for tackle, right? And the dwarf team has paid for tackle by sacrificing movement and sacrificing agility. And the Wood Elf team at this point has dodge on the War Dancer, right? So you have paid for skills that will not pay for themselves in this specific game.
Yeah. I'm also personally okay with this game happening now, just in the sense of not having to deal with a second War Dancer or a tree.
Yeah.
Like having parity strength-wise across the board is something that I feel pretty comfortable with. Obviously would have liked to have gotten a little bit more skills on the team going in, but it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Like it's going to be a good game. I think it's probably going to be close.
Yeah. That's another one of those. That's another one of those could be a tie, and yeah.
Could be a tie. Could be like 1-0 my way. Could be 2-0 his way. It could go a lot of different directions.
Yeah.
We got up next Dark Elves and Chaos Dwarves, current defending champion.
Yep.
Playing against the new look version of the team that she won the league with. Chaos Dwarves are down a Bull Centaur. They have 1 Bull Centaur and a Minotaur, along with their assembly of Chaos Dwarves and Hobgoblins.
I actually think this is like a good hinge point for both of these teams, because they're both 1-1 right now, and I respect both of these players, Maria and James. I think they're both solid players, and so this is like the wheels are coming off of your season if you start 1-2 here, or you've built your momentum towards a championship team at 2-1. And so I think this game is like both players could go back and look at this and be like, oh, this is where the season was decided, right?
Definitely, I think that's a game I'm going to be watching very intently this week. Not only because it's a divisional rival, but I think it's going to be one of the best games this week.
Yeah, I think so.
We've got Return to Monk, Teal Terror, Ogres, and the other Dark Elf team. in this division.
Yeah. So Sean has played ogres before, but it has been he's played ogres in a league before, but it's been a long time. He's played a lot of ogres in tournaments. Barbie, obviously, still relatively new to Blood Bowl. If you're talking about players willing to take risks, she developed a taste for shenanigans somewhere along the way, and so she starts trying wacky stuff. Now, the funny thing is that ogres are actually a good team to try wacky stuff against, especially with elves, because the Noblars do not punish you for dodging. You can have an elf walk through any number of Noblars as long as you can hit your twos. And so, like, a Noblar cage is a dire situation for ogres against elves because a blitzer can just run in there and smash the Noblar that's got the ball. Sean's pretty crafty, and he's going to get some inducements for the game. He is down an ogre, but he's got treasury. He could buy a 5th ogre. I think he's been trying to modulate his team value to get inducements, and I think he's also got just more experience. So I think ogres will likely win that game, but there might be some surprising things that come out of the Dark Elf team.
Yeah. Looked at the box right before recording, and it currently showed him getting 370,000.
Yeah.
So
it's a lot.
If he sticks with that, that's a good chunk of things.
Yeah, it's Griff plus something, right? So, moving on to the Snake Eyes division. We've got TBD and the Slee Stacks. So Shambling Undead and Lizardmen. This is kind of a classic matchup in my opinion. Lots of teams where there's a lot of strength and a lot of 10 armor. I think Mike Morales there with TBD. He's probably he's kind of a crafty player, and he's kind of like smarting from his last loss, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if he takes it out on Jeremy in this game.
Yeah, that's going to be definitely had its one down as a recovery game to see if you could get back some of that momentum that was just torn away from you by losing a white and a goal. So I think that Shambling Undead's going to be pretty decent here. Jeremy's defense has been giving up, I think it's like about three touchdowns a game. So that's going to give Michael some opportunities. And the thing I'm most interested in this game is seeing if we can continue this streak of skink casualties.
Yeah. I wouldn't put it past Jeremy. That's the type of thing that Jeremy's, I think, is kind of known for, is kind of the wackier plays, for sure. If you've got a situation where you have a lone ghoul and you can get 3 skinks on it, that's a 2-die block, right? And if that ghoul's got the ball, maybe you take the boat down on the skink, right? Your skink is worth less than the ghoul is, so take your shot.
Yeah, I think all I want to see is just that casualty. I think it's all worth it. Great Treed Good Boyus and Blood Moon Gang.
Yeah, so gnomes and goblins. I'm sure this is a matchup neither of them really wants, right? Because there's not going to be any kind of like inducements for either team, really, either way. Warren is opting to play goblins without like the pile of dirty tricks. He mostly uses the chainsaw. I think gnomes are like they're kind of a wacky team. They really don't play like any other Blood Bowl team, right? I mean, I think on paper the most obvious comparison is halflings, but they play completely differently than halflings do. I think will probably win the game because gnomes are really good at putting points up, and goblins struggle with that. However, since it's a stunty match, this game could have like 10 casualties between both teams, and that wouldn't be like weird. That wouldn't even be like notable. It'd just be okay. Yeah, like trees were splattering goblins and gnomes were exploding to whatever touched them. So
yeah, definitely going to see if the Foxes can really start racking up touchdowns. They've been a little quiet so far the first 2 weeks, but if they start running, goblins aren't going to catch them.
Yeah, I mean the one thing you got to worry about is like the chainsaw, right? Like a chainsaw's going to chew through a fox. So, well, I guess we'll have to see.
Yeah, maybe the strategy will be trying to get the chainsaw off the pitch and then put the foxes in. That'll be some work. Play with Gods versus Dodge This.
Yeah, Black Orcs and Tomb Kings. I want to say this isn't the greatest matchup in the world for Black Orcs. Tomb Kings are a team that really punish people that want to try to outmuscle the opponent because they are the biggest, burliest team out there, right? You got all that 5 strength. However, they're not very good at moving the ball. I could see this game. This game could be a 0-0 draw, honestly. I don't think that wouldn't be shocking. I think the most likely outcome is a 1-0 here. And I don't know. Probably I'd give it to Tomb Kings, but Black Orcs at least have stunty. You could do some shenanigans with some goblins. You could position them in such a way where you could possibly get a touchdown. That the Tomb Kings, they don't have the agility to really kind of like try to jump into a cage or mess anything up. So
we talk a lot about inducements. Obviously, this Tomb King team was constructed, it seems, with inducements in mind. Currently having 200,000, about 210K.
Yeah, I wonder if his plan was to just try to take Ivan or Wilhelm every game. That's certainly a game plan. Both of those players are really strong. Wilhelm, especially, I think, for Tomb Kings, brings something to the table that the team desperately wants. Wilhelm is a threat to score at speed 8, and the catch skill you can hand off to him. That's fairly reliable. And then speed 8 means he can leave the rest of the team in the dust. And he's strength 4, so he's not easy to take down. And then he also has some claws, so that gives you a little bit of can opening that the team is missing early on before the mummies come online.
Definitely, I think that one will be kind of interesting to watch. Like you were saying, just like all these strength 4 and 5 pieces gonna be like staring at each other, trying to figure out. I think like the kickoff is gonna be big in my mind to see like who can get first hits.
Yeah, I suspect that whichever player there's a world where a slight incremental advantage early on, probably brought on by fouling, then segues into a total blowout later on because you got behind on people, you got behind on the strength curve, you got behind on all this other stuff, and then the other person just kind of takes full control of the game. But I do think it's just as likely that nothing happens to any of the 10 armor players, and you are throwing blocks for a bunch of turns, and there's nothing that occurs because of that.
Game a lot of people probably watching this week: Bad Moon Rising versus the ROUS.
Yeah, this is some league champs squaring off, past league champs squaring off. Necromantic, a reeling Necromantic team. They're 2-0, but it cost them the arguably the best player in the league, versus Juan and the Skaven. And Juan's coming off a really bad game. This is another one of those where he wants this win bad, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's obviously Jim has played teams with a Rat Ogre on it before. I believe he's played against Juan playing with a Rat Ogre before, so I think that'll be interesting to see like that experience, how much that lends into Jim's game plan. Because I do think Jim, as you were saying earlier, is a very deliberate player, very good at formulating optimal plays.
Yeah, they're actually players on Necro that I do not mind basing big guys with. When I played Necro last season, I would often just toss a zombie at a big guy, give him the hit, but I was trying to control where the big guy was on the pitch, right? I think Necro is like a better defensive team. It is really hard to play offense with this team because you have, in peak condition, you have 4 people who can handle the ball, like with anything resembling any kind of accuracy. And Jim is missing the werewolf in this one. So it's like easier to play defense with this team because your whites and your flesh golems don't go where people want them to. They don't really give up squares, and your zombies, like you have opponents who will waste a whole game slapping away at zombies with like very little to gain from it.
The true undefeated matchup of the week, 2-0 players going against each other, Zero Luck Chucks, Electric City Maulers. This game features what might now be the best player in the league.
Yeah, the whiff. Coop has appropriately named all the Zero Luck Chucks after various flubs, various fails, various other things. But yeah, the Zero Luck Chucks has got an incredible Dark Elf Blitzer right now. He's got 2 level ups. I think it's the most experienced player in the league. And it's a block, dodge, tackle, which is just a good combination of skills to have.
Obviously, looking at the rosters, Electric Maulers are missing their orc. They're also missing a lineman that did have skill that's going to possibly place them into this. 2 big guys that don't have skills yet.
Yeah. This is another one of those mostly human lineman teams right now, right? I don't think you're not sad that the orc is gone for this game, right? You don't really need the armor. What you need is mobility against elves. And your big guys, maybe you get lucky, maybe they get some casualties, but I don't necessarily love big guys into elves, because you base an elf with a big guy, they dodge away, and then you repeat that for 16 turns, and that just feels miserable.
I'm interested in this game. Obviously, Zero Chucks, there's still no rerolls. Do you think that's gonna change here soon?
Well, he did. Trav did level up his runner to have leader. He gave him leader before he gave him block, before he gave him dodge, before he gave him sure hands, before he gave him any other skill. He went with leader. So there are those out there in Radio Land that might consider this a flavor fail, but we'll allow it. But yeah, I mean, I think. I don't know that this is the game where he gets punished for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Last regular division game, Gnarly Oaks versus the team that you so expertly handled last week, the Southern California Trojans. Looking at this roster, Elven Union throwers out for this game. So
that was me. Sorry, Chase. Sorry.
No one better than 4+ passing on this roster for this game. Might have an impact just on the offensive capability.
Yeah, the situation that occurred at the end of the game versus Chase was that he did manage to pop the ball loose, but the ball landed in his end zone. So if I pick the ball up, I score and my turn ends and the drive ends, right? And I opted to go for that. That was my second touchdown. And the reason I did that was because I had taken out his thrower. And the thing about Elven Union is that I think they are probably the best passing team in the game. High Elves have not received like an update. You would think that High Elves would be. That's kind of like their flavor or whatever. But the Elven Union catcher is an insane player. Right? 8 speed, catch, nerves of steel. Crazy reception target, right? Now, there's enough speed on the catchers that you could put a catcher in the backfield. He can go grab the ball, and then he's fast enough so that depending on where the ball lands, You don't have to do it the same turn, but you can just hand off to the other catcher. You still get your 2 up to catch. And your catcher could even be based with people. You still have a 2 up to catch. And so it can be really hard to stop Elven Union from scoring. They're probably up there with Skaven, in my opinion, of I don't care how good you are at defense. A player who is playing dedicated offense with his team is going to put points on the board. If they get the ball, they can put points on the board.
On the overall Alliance side, Sean's team's been developing fairly well. Sean also forward league champion, very solid fundamental player. So that'll be a matchup I'm looking to see. How this ragtag group of humans and dwarves and a tree can.
Yeah, and a couple of their halfling cronies.
Yeah.
I played Sean week 1, and I did win that game, but he did put a lot of casualties on me. And so that's like part of his team's development is that despite losing, he got a lot of star player points in that game. And while something like the tree isn't really something you want against elves, the tree does create kind of like a dead zone around it on the field. It's a zone of denial where it's like it's not even worth considering this area of the table. Go around it. Go elsewhere, right? The tree will probably get hits on the line whenever there's a kickoff to the Old World Alliance. But other than that, I don't see the tree playing like a huge part of the game. I mean, honestly, stuff like the Slayer and the Dwarf Blitzer and the Human Blitzer are all really good in this matchup. Chase has he's got a block dodge sidestep Blitzer, and that's just an incredible player. The Blitzer, honestly, one of the wacky things about Elven Union is that the Elven Union Blitzers are passing 3 up. So worst case, you burn a team reroll on a 3 up passing. And maybe the blitzer is the one who carries the ball to begin with. And like you could put the blitzer in the backfield. Since he was missing a blitzer for our game, he'll have it back. You can use that blitzer to open up a hole somewhere in the defense, and then give the ball to the Elven Union blitzer, who could then make like a short pass, and then a handoff from that. A short pass to a catcher. That catcher hands off to the other catcher, and then that catcher goes and scores. And that's like a really hard chain to defend against.
This is the lost to Nathan Constellation Bowl.
Yeah, right.
Well,
this is the game that gives me 3 points to my Bucult score.
Well, there you go. Hopefully. So, last game, interdivisional game this week, is your game. You're playing against the Jolly Rotters.
Yes, Clay is actually a player I haven't played against yet, so I'm looking forward to that. I always enjoy playing against new people. This Shambling Undead team is looking pretty gnarly, right? It's looking pretty rough.
Yeah, you gotta watch out for those interceptions.
I do, yeah. I have been known to pass with this Khorne team so far, so I have no completions, but I've definitely attempted some passes.
Oh, there you go. The thing that question I have you, obviously through the first 2 weeks, Clay has not shown any fear of fouls and players. How is that affecting kind of your thought process going into the game at all?
So somewhere, it was either season 2 or season 3, I realized that I was just going to be fouled 10 plus times a game, right? So I just go into the game assuming I'm going to be fouled 10 or more times from this point. And so I try not to put my people in positions where if they do get knocked down and they get fouled, that it's like good for the opponent to do that. Fouling often backfires on my opponents because they get their own people kicked out of the game for me, and that helps me in the long run. I'm not terrified of that in this game. Not really any more so than I normally am. It's just when I played Norse, fouls. When I played Amazon, getting fouled. That's just the nature of the game. I like playing teams where I have people that if they die, it doesn't greatly affect my mood or plans for the rest of the season. Vampires were kind of that way. Thralls were disposable, right? When I'm playing defense, you can hit Thralls. You're not going to hit the vampires. But if one of my vampires goes down and gets fouled, I just expect it, right? And so, you have to kind of plan for a whole season where maybe you lose the best player in your team, gym style, right? Maybe that happens to you. You can't let that, especially if you want to win a championship, you can't let that affect you ultimately. I'm looking forward to the game. He's played kind of filthy. That means I got to go into it respecting him, right? Yeah.
Well, the only downside to this being your interdivisional game is that we won't get a chance to play until a possible playoff.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, right. I would certainly rather play Clay than have to play Wayne, have to play Sean, have to play Jurgen. There's a lot of people in the other division that I won't refuse to play them. I'm not going to duck the game. I'm not going to develop a sudden illness and forfeit the game. I will square off against them, but when I do have to play against really good players, I prefer to be on the better side of the matchup. And I don't think my team necessarily matches up well into halflings right now, right? So
yeah, I think that's definitely a little sub game through the season is as you see each interdivisional week, the pool of your potential opponents dwindles.
Yeah.
Until you finally get picked. So it's seeing oh, well, I didn't really want to play against this person.
Yeah.
Getting all those out of the way early is kind of a treat, but then also a little bit of a sweat.
Yeah, and I would say there's definitely some sweat removed, right? Wayne being out of the interdivisional pool for some people is probably a relief, but even Ness, right? There's a lot of people who just wouldn't want to play against. You see him kill a werewolf, and you're like, well, I'm glad that was somebody else that played against him and not me, type of thing, right?
Interdivisional, obviously, it's going to be some bragging rights, also.
Yeah.
Division doesn't go.
Yeah, that's one of those where especially if one division is the one who wins 70% of it or whatever, right? You get to make your jokes at the end of the season. So
yeah. Kind of like the playoffs last season.
Yeah. Yeah. Well. Yeah. Sure. What did happen that way?
All right. Well, I think that's pretty much all I got for this week. It's going to be we got a couple good matchups. I don't think there's any that are going to be too awful blowout-wise, hopefully.
Yeah, you never know. A game can always degenerate really fast, but I do think the quality of player in the league is definitely the gap between the worst player in the league and the best player in the league is definitely decreasing over time. That's one of those things that we've talked about for several leagues now where there aren't really free wins in the league, other than the ones Nuffle will give you from time to time because your dice are just so insane. There's a lot of stiff competition, and even games that you're winning can go disastrously wrong for you, right? So you gotta respect it at all times.
Yeah. Any last thoughts going into week 3?
I think we've pretty much covered it. This has been a blast, and I'm looking forward to what else we can do on the podcast moving forward.
Yeah, I'm super happy with it so far. Obviously, we've got some room to build off of things, but if you've been listening to all this, really appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you're following us wherever you are listening to this, and keep tuned next week. We'll have another episode, hopefully talk about some victories. And maybe not a dead werewolf. Maybe a dead dark elf. Knock the best player in the league down every week.
It would be, it would be really funny if that trend continued, where the best player in the league just gets killed every week. That would be an incredible league.
Yeah, we'll have to take the Sarah McLachlan bit and add it to Dark Elves.
Yeah.
But yeah. yeah, thank you all for listening. We'll catch you next week.
All right. Have a great day.